Hello and welcome to Verified Live on a day totally dominated by Israel's strikes on Iran. The magnitude of these attacks are on a completely different scale to what we saw last year. Israel says they targeted Iran's nuclear program, claiming it was their very survival that was at stake. Tehran, though, has described it as an act of war. Explosions were heard in the capital, Tehran, and at the Natanz nuclear facility, around 200 miles to the south. Several Iranian nuclear scientists and military commanders have been killed. Iran's state TV is reporting that civilians, including children, are among the dead. Well, the scale of the damage to the nuclear facilities like this in Natanz is not yet clearly known. Much of the Iranian program is carried out deep underground. Well, Israel says its military action is continuing. Its secret service Mossad has taken the rare step of releasing this footage, which it claims was filmed inside Iran, showing its operatives preparing to launch an attack. Well, Iran has already retaliated, sending a wave of drones towards Israel. Israeli forces say all of them were intercepted. In the next 60 minutes, we'll bring you the latest reaction from various capitals. We'll also look at what was hit, who was hit. We'll also examine the various strategies being carried out by Israel and Iran. Well, let's talk to our correspondents in Jerusalem. Ione Wells is there. Our North America correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, is there at the White House. And our political correspondent, Helen Catt, is at Westminster. But I want to go straight to the White House and straight to Nomia, because over the last couple of hours, Nomia, a number of lines. The President has given several interviews. What is the general thrust of what Donald Trump is saying?
Well, to be quite straight with you, Matthew, it's incredibly confusing. Initially, we were told by the Trump administration via the Secretary of State Marco Rubio that the US was not involved in this. Mr. Rubio really distancing the US from Israel's actions, calling them unilateral. Donald Trump then appears to have contradicted that, saying a few moments ago that we knew everything. Exactly what they knew, we don't know. The White House is still saying they didn't greenlight it, so they may not have officially approved of the attack, but they certainly approve of it. Because in his social media posts, Mr. Trump appears to basically be saying to Iran, start negotiating, and if you don't, there will be more of this to come. And I suspect the US is using this as some sort of leverage to push Iran to the negotiation table. There is an emergency meeting right now being held by President Trump here at the White House with his cabinet. We understand that he will be talking to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later this afternoon. But there are also reports that he and Mr. Netanyahu were talking yesterday in several phone calls. So there is some confusion about exactly what the US knew, how much it's involved in all of this. But I do think, looking at the social media posts by Donald Trump, he clearly approves of what Israel is doing.
Nomia, I'll return to you in a moment, but let's go to Jerusalem and Ione Wells. And Ione, just in the last few minutes, reports coming in that there are multiple blasts that have been heard in Tehran. There are also blasts to the west of Tehran, and that fits with what the Israeli authorities and perhaps what Donald Trump was alluding to in his social media post, that this is ongoing. It is simply the start of things.
That's right. In the last couple of minutes, as you say, Iranian state TV have confirmed that they are intercepting missiles over Tehran. And that doesn't really come as a surprise. As you say, it was expected that there would be further escalation in this conflict after Israel launched severe strikes last night on Iran. I think it's worth just recapping just how much of a devastating shock those strikes were to Iran. They came in the middle of the night, attacking some of Iran's most senior military commanders as well as nuclear scientists. More than 200 planes striking more than 100 sites in Iran, as well as that Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, launched missiles from inside of Iranian territory. So it is clear that this was a severe escalation and that attacks are expected to continue between the two sides in the coming hours, but also in in the coming days. One thing that both sides agree on is that this is just the beginning. The IDF, Israel's military, has said that this is war. Iran's foreign ministry has described Israel's actions yesterday as a declaration of war, and both sides are expected to continue these attacks, as I say, in the coming days, coming hours. That's something which was reiterated, as you mentioned there, by the US President Donald Trump, who said in a statement that if Iran didn't agree a deal, that more brutal attacks were coming. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been speaking to foreign leaders, including an expected conversation with President Trump. So it may be that we get more indication once those calls are complete about some next steps expected.
I'll be back, Ione, to you in a moment or two, but I want to bring in Helen Catt in Westminster because, Helen, we were hearing earlier about the upcoming phone call between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, also Vladimir Putin, but we know from the Prime Minister's office he's also spoken to the leaders of Germany, India and France. The obvious omission is number 10. We know that relations have been strained over recent days, but interesting, no apparent call to Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah, this was brought up at the daily briefing for reporters in Westminster, and the Downing Street spokesperson couldn't or wouldn't say whether there had been any call between Keir Starmer and Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Keir Starmer has addressed that since in an interview with Bloomberg. He had said that he was planning to call Mr Netanyahu this afternoon. We don't yet know if that call has taken place. But as you said, there's been a real effort among the government here to focus on de-escalation and diplomacy, and specifically working with allies to try and put the pressure on to reach a diplomatic solution. So as there was a call between Keir Starmer this morning and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Now, in that call, the leaders discussed what were described as their long-held grave concerns about Iran's nuclear programme. They called on all sides to refrain from further escalation, which they say could destabilise the region. So that certainly does seem to be the focus from the government here. Should say, though, there's a slightly different tone coming out from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. She had declined to say Israel's action, she said, as an escalation, and instead said it should not be condemned if it was stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
Helen, thanks very much. Let's head back to the White House and Nomia Iqbal. And Nomia, one of the things that Donald Trump has said in the last hour is that he's pretty confident that there won't be a regional war. But the very fact he has to say a phrase like that underlines what is at risk here.
It does, and bear in mind, this is a president who has made a big point in his campaigning that he doesn't believe in wars. He's a no-war president. He doesn't want any foreign intervention. He wants countries to get on with whatever they want to do. He doesn't want the US intervening. And so certainly those who support him, his coalition, his base, will be split on this. They'll be thinking, well, hang on a minute, how much is the US involved in this? And you know, as we were talking earlier, even though the White House is saying that they didn't officially greenlight this, it does appear that Donald Trump hugely approves of this. And it is going to be somewhat of a balancing act for him because, of course, Israel is the US's greatest ally in the Middle East and they want to protect Israel. We know that Donald Trump is very adamant about that, but at the same time has to deliver on that promise that he has constantly made to his supporters about no wars. And I just want to also add, Matthew, we understand that the Pentagon is now moving US destroyers to the Eastern Mediterranean as Israel obviously braces for that potential retaliation. Now, these ships are capable of defending against ballistic and cruise missile attacks. They were already in the region, but they're now rerouting because of Israel's attack on Iran to provide the US with that extra layer of security. The US is obviously very concerned about any retaliation on US targets and US personnel and have made it quite clear to Iran that they will not accept that if it happens.
Nomia, thanks very much. Let's head back to Jerusalem and Ione Wells. And Ione, we were listening to Danny Danon there at the UN a short while ago, and we'll play that clip for viewers in a moment or two. But he was repeating what the IDF had said to me earlier in the day, which is that Israel perceived that there was a realistic threat imminent. That is their position as to why they launched this attack. But the truth is that over decades, Benjamin Netanyahu has wanted to do action like this, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. This is something that Benjamin Netanyahu has been talking about since the 1990s, not just about a threat of nuclear weapons from Iran being imminent, but a desire to neutralize them. It seems that now the Prime Minister felt emboldened to try to do so. As you say, Netanyahu, shortly after these strikes were made last night, said that his justification for this was that Iran had now developed nuclear material sufficient to make nuclear weapons, enough to make 9 nuclear bombs. Now, Iran has always continuously denied that its nuclear capabilities are for weaponry and said that they are for civilian use only. But one extra factor this week was that the International Atomic Energy Agency had said that Iran, for the first time in 20 years, was breaching its anti-proliferation obligations, which is something that has also been cited by the Israelis today.
Ione, thanks very much. I'm going to quickly go back to Westminster because there's been a development just as we were having the conversations with our correspondents. Helen Catt, there is an update from Downing Street.
There is, yes. You were talking about whether or not there had been a call between Keir Starmer and Benjamin Netanyahu. We understand that that has now happened, although, as you mentioned earlier, quite a long way it would appear down the list of world leaders this afternoon. In that, we're told that Keir Starmer said that he recognised that Israel had a clear right to self-defence. He was clear that Israel had a right to self-defence, and that he again expressed his grave concerns about Israel's nuclear programme.
Helen Catt there at Westminster, thanks very much, and thanks too to Ione Wells and thanks to Nomi Iqbal at the White House. Plenty more on that, our main story, coming up in a moment or two, but around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.